we go back to that communication, that if you have to make change, you have to communicate why you're changing and where you're changing, what the vision is behind it. So having a close relationship with board, close relationship with executive, with the player group is critical, so they can see why you're making the changes that you're making.
Wayne, in the modern game though, the new trend seems to be have these senior management groups. I'll just ask you a couple of questions on leadership groups. The first being the senior leadership group within the administration of the club. How do you see that for the coach?
Yeah, really interesting with the senior manager-coach relationship. In AFL, what they've done is they've surrounded, in Hawthorn and Geelong specifically, they've got a young coach. So Hawthorn's got a young coach called Alistair Clarkson, very energetic, very motivated, could be one of the great coaches. And what they've done is they've put a former senior coach, Chris Fagan, with him as a mentor and as a guide and someone who can balance out his skill set. Now over at Geelong, who are the premiership winners from last year and the trendsetters for this year, that they had a young coach similar to Clarkson, motivated, driven, energetic, and they recruited the football operations manager from Collingwood, Neil Baum, who was an older head, smart guy, politically savvy, very experienced, could deal with media, again for that complementary skill set. Interesting that a lot of clubs are starting to go down that road, is marrying a football operations manager, a football department manager, or a high performance manager with a head coach, looking for that complementary skill set. But you hit the nail on the head there, is that the critical thing is a relationship between them, the two. They've got to be tight. And I can see a day coming very much when a club starts recruiting for two positions and two roles. Another interesting thing that's happening with AFL clubs and some of the Olympic sports is that they're moving the head coach away, another step away from the CEO. So if you look at a sport like cricket, for example, instead of the head coach reporting to the CEO, the head coach now reports to the director of cricket. They're a step away. Some of the AFL clubs have done that. Some of the rugby teams are looking at that as well. I wonder if we'll see that in NRL, because high performance is such a specialist area, potentially the source of your greatest problems, and such a specialist, unique set of skills. I wonder if we'll see more of a high performance manager, high performance unit, of which the head coach is a part of.
But getting back to the leadership group, the player leadership group, it's the senior members of the players' leadership group. It would be vitally important that he gets on and works well with that leadership group.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one, because I think we're all grappling with this, how much empowerment. When we talk about really empowerment and engaging the players in achievement of the vision, so that communication thing we talked about again, communicating with the players and engaging them, saying, look, as a head coach, this is where I want to go. This is what I believe we can do to be successful. Now, I want you to be part of that. I want to engage you in that process and engage you in my vision. Part of that then is this empowerment argument. How much power do I give the leadership group? Now, I can call myself a jockey, but unless I lose 50 kilos and spend 10 years learning, I'm not a jockey. And the same thing with leaders. You can say to a player, well, you're now a leader, but unless you train them to lead and train them to work with others and train them to communicate, it doesn't work. Another big question that you have to come to terms with as a coach or as an organisation is how much engagement, how much empowerment do you give? If you stand too far back as a head coach and say to the players, well, you run it, you run the risk of being a bit alienated from the player group. And I've seen this in several clubs where the coaches stood back and said, well, guys, it's all yours, your baby, you drive it. Some of the players then ask, well, what the hell is the head coach doing? What do they actually, where are they adding value? So I'm a strong believer in the coach. Head coach might believe in empowerment, but they've still got to have their mark on the game. They've still got to have the standards that they want to see and the culture they want to see in the club. They've still got to have opportunities over the week in preparation to make sure that they're at the right level and right standard. The leadership group's also got to evolve. That when the coach comes in, the player group might be very new to the leadership experience, and then over time they may voluntarily want to take on more power because they're getting better at it. To me, the qualities of a leadership group are that players are capable of going to other players and saying, that's not good enough. Lift your standards, because that's what we expect. Because a coach can do that. A coach traditionally is capable of going to a player and saying, mate, it's not up to standard, lift your game or you'll be on the bench. Very difficult to do that to your peers, but it's a sign of maturity as a leader and a sign of evolution as a player group that they can go up to another player in a gym and say, mate, not good enough. Let's do it. Let's work together. When the players start to drive the standards, so really start being engaged in the culture, then you're on a winner.
Pretty powerful, isn't it?
It is. Well, if the coach is the only one driving it, he's going to run out of energy very, very quickly. If the players are really engaged and really buying into it, so that they're driving standards and they're taking responsibility for discipline. And it's a hot issue at the moment in rugby league, AFL and rugby union. It's a hot issue about discipline. Who drives the discipline? Who drives the alcohol policies of the team? Who drives the performance culture of the team? Again, the coach, CEO, board have all got influence, but when you get to a point where the players are driving discipline and sustaining performance discipline standards, then you're really on a winner. And that takes time. We talk back about those younger coaches, the Cardis and the Taylors. It takes time to evolve your leadership group to that level of maturity where they really take ownership and start to drive it for you. You talk to some coaches, just the energy that's required, the energy you have to give in the early stages is incredible. And then that starts to balance out as the leadership group evolves and matures and learns. But that takes 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
So when you're at the interview table with your prospective coach and you say, well, there's our team. We've got Bill here, we've got Wayne, we've got him in our team. The coach has got a whole different set of rules. He wants to bring in new recruits and he wants to do his recruitment. How important is it that he's be giving you a free hand with recruitment? As far as recruiting new players?
A lot is the short answer. Is a lot. It's important that when the coach the coach actually comes up with a recruitment policy or a recruitment guideline. Again, just in the same way that the organisation is tempted just to find the best coach or the most experienced head coach, it's really tempting to say the only players I'm after are kangaroos. Anybody else, not interested in. But they may not work in the culture. I think the critical thing a coach has got to ask when they're recruiting is say, does this player add to the culture? Will this player lift our culture? So you might find that you've got a player who by reputation is outstanding, can beat a player, great attacking skills, whatever it might be, but just doesn't fit in the culture. But secondly, has got some off-field issues or has got some behavioural issues that decrease the overall culture or take away value. What you want is to say, I want a talented player, sure, but how can I increase? How can I lift our work ethic? How can I lift our belief? How do I lift our overall ability to deal with pressure? How do I lift our overall culture? How can I find players that can do that? And I think if you listen to Alex Ferguson, the Manchester United coach, he says, look, I can buy any player in the world. I can buy anyone. What I want, though, is someone who, by their actions and the way they prepare and their attitudes, lifts our overall standards across the park. Not just someone who can kick goals, but someone who lifts our training standards, lifts our behaviour, lifts our discipline, lifts our work ethic. Because that way, if everyone's lifting, then I can get the culture that I'm after.
We might just wind it up, Wayne, by just giving you to give us a quick finishing overview, if you want to call it that. It's just, say, 3 or 4 main points as far as what clubs, or even more if you want to, but of what I know we've covered a lot of areas, but is there 3 or 4 main points that the club should look at?
Critical that the first question that they can answer is, what do they really want from a head coach? That's vital. Easy way to do it is to get senior members of the player group, the executive, the board, some other stakeholders together and say, what do we want from a head coach? And really get that tight and understand what you want. And look at different angles of that. What sort of play do we want? What sort of trademark? What do we want? We want people to look at the Broncos, we want to look at the Titans or the Bulldogs or the Raiders and say, wow, they play that style of football. So look at that. What style of football, what's our trademark going to be on a football field that we want to be known for? The culture. What culture do we want? Do we want a culture of discipline, work ethic, toughness? Do we want a culture of attacking, open? Do we want a culture that's driven by a coach? Do we want a culture that's driven by players? Do we want a culture that's driven by the board? So what sort of culture do we want? And then start to put together the puzzle. Okay, what do we want? Who can deliver that at this point of evolution? And probably the third thing is really think about where you are